I'm not sure if you know how difficult it is sometimes to get the caliber of men that we have speaking to us over this weekend. These men are well sought after in terms of lectureships and seminars and gospel meetings and all kinds of speaking engagements. And so they're very difficult to find such caliber men and be able to get them here. And sometimes you have to try to, retain them a year, 2 years out. Eric Lyons is one of those individuals. I don't know how many years I've tried to get Eric up here and called him and text him, and finally he was able to come. Eric Lyons is an incredible talent and faithful minister for the church. Eric Lyons is a graduate of Freed-Hardeman University, where he earned a BS degree with a double major in Bible and history and an MDiv as well. Eric has served as a full-time member of the Bible department at Apologetics Press since 2001. Eric and his wife, Jana, who is with him this evening, lives in Wetumpka, Alabama, where Eric has also worked with the Wetumpka Church of Christ since 2007, formerly as a minister and now as an elder. Eric has authored or co-authored over 20 books. In addition, he continues to regularly write for Apologetics Press website, which receives millions of page reviews annually from users around the globe. Eric speaks frequently at seminars, gospel meetings around the country, and we're just delighted to have him here with us this evening. His topic is going to be why we didn't evolve and why it matters. Eric.
If you were here for the previous lesson that Jeff Miller from Apologetics Press, see if I'm on here, that he delivered, you were treated with a whole semester's worth of information that he gives at the Bear Valley School of Preaching. I tell you, Jeff, I really appreciated getting schooled today. That was great. I was also feeling kind of sorry for those Bear Valley students who have him. If Jeff covers that material as fast as he did in that hour here, I was thinking, man, I would be scared to death if I was one of Jeff's students. And Mike Houts is going to be speaking to us, Lord willing, here in a little bit. A couple hours maybe, I don't know. I feel just so blessed that I got up here 15 minutes earlier than I thought I was going to get up. I thought we might be singing till 7:30, but I got up here at 7:15, and I really appreciated the great songs that we were led in this evening. I did not know one or two of those songs, and were just beautiful. Really appreciate that, and getting to sing praises to our awesome God. Mike and Jeff and I, we come from Alabama. Jeff grew up in Texas. I'm an Okie from Muskogee, so I'm an Okie. And, Mike, he works with NASA. He came from Mars or something like that. I'm not sure where Mike came from. But we went all hunting one day there not far from where I live there in Elmore County. And it was the last day of deer season, and we all were looking for this big buck that we've been hearing about. And can you believe that we finally saw it? And I shot it, and Jeff shot it, and Mike shot it. And so we all came out of our deer stands claiming that we had shot it, and we do what most men do these days. We like to brag to our wives, so we pull out our cell phone, and we began taking pictures of this big buck and texting our wives saying, honey, look what I just did. And Jeff was like, wait a minute, Eric. I killed this buck. You did not kill this deer. I said, yes, I think I did, Jeff. And, Jeff is not a violent person. Not at all. He is like a big giant who could squash you, but he's very gentle normally. But, I was getting a little concerned at this moment. And cool, calm, and collected Mike Hout says, well, let me see if I can examine the deer to see whose it was. Now, Jeff and I were thinking, now, Mike, we know he's an honest guy, but is he going to try to, fudge a little bit and this be Mike's deer? So Mike said, let me look at it. I know, I'm a nuclear engineer. I'm not, a biologist or a doctor, but maybe he could tell. So, maybe the deer was from Mars or something. I don't know. But so he looked at the front end of the deer. He looked at the back end of the deer. He looked at the front end of the deer. He said, this is the preacher's deer. This is Eric's deer. And I said, yes, that's what I was hoping for. But I said, Mike, how did you know? He said, well, it was a clean shot. And I, what do you mean it was a clean shot? He said, well, Eric, the bullet went in one ear and out the other, so it's got to be your deer. You all have put me in between, a rocket science, a real rocket scientist and a biomechanical engineer. And, you know, I'm just a preacher, and I love being a preacher. I'm kind of like, you know, Jeff's the Texas toast, and Mike's maybe the bottom of the Texas toast, and I'm just the cheesy guy in the middle. Maybe that's what I am. But it's a pleasure to be with you all this weekend. I'm very, very honored to be here. Nothing really more important to discuss than our awesome God. I mean, you can't get any better. It doesn't get any better than thinking about, you know, the reality of God, the existence of God, the wonders of God, the things that we just got through singing and praising our awesome God about. You know, the question of, well, there's a lot of questions that we ask. We ask a lot of questions that just don't really matter a whole lot. You know, last night, Jana and I, we were in a motel or hotel in Atlanta before catching a plane this morning. And I remember her saying, so what time are we getting up in the morning? Well, does that really matter that much? I mean, yeah, we needed to catch the plane, but, you know, it wasn't the most important question in the world. Or what are we going to eat? You know, last night on the way driving from Wetumpka, Alabama to Atlanta, you know, I was thinking, what are we going to eat? And we found a Jack's. So, you know, we ate at Jack's, but we could have just as easily eaten at McDonald's, or we could have eaten, you know, somewhere else. And, you know, we ask a lot of questions that don't really matter. Some questions absolutely matter. You know, one question that I would contend may very well be, and in my judgment is the most fundamental in a way, is why we are here. Like, why does a person exist? And you recall that there's an entire book of the Old Testament where Solomon addresses really largely why we're not here. And he goes through a number of reasons. You know, vanity of vanity, says the preacher. Vanity of vanity, all is vanity under the sun. From a purely physical perspective, it's meaningless, it's useless. I mean, really, if that's what we're living for, and Solomon had tried it all, right? I mean, the power, the prestige, the pleasures of life, the money, he had it all at one time, and he's saying, by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, and he experienced this himself, hey, no, it's vanity. And then you get to the end, and he begins to tell us how we can understand our why. And he says, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth. You're never going to understand. You're never going to have real purpose in this life. Real, objective, definable, understandable, absolutely provable purpose unless there is a God. But what our young people have been fed, and I mean our older people have been fed when they were younger especially, and even still now, and now our younger people more and more are fed things about cosmic and biological evolution. You know, about how, you know, it all began with the formation of stars and planetary systems, and proceeds to primitive and complex life, and culminates with intelligence, technology, and astronomers contemplating the universe. Well, how did the universe get here? You know, what's the meaning of all this? Where did we come from? Does it get any more basic than that? In his debate with Dan Barker, theist Todd Friel asked Dan Barker, do you really believe that something came from nothing? Where did it all start? Where did we come from? From a purely naturalistic, atheistic perspective, we came from nothing. Dan Barker is one of the leading atheists in this country. I mean, I'm not saying that he is the most intellectual atheist in this country, but he's one of the most outspoken ones, and he says, yeah, you know, we came from nothing. When he was still alive, Dr. Stephen Hawking was on a television show called Curiosity that was put out by the Discovery Channel. And you may recall one of the episodes, if I remember correctly, one of the early episodes was on, did God create the universe? And the foremost, I suppose, most well-known astrophysicist in the world at that time said, well, it all came spontaneously. Space and energy were spontaneously created in the Big Bang. Isn't it interesting how naturalistic, atheistic evolutionists, how they will borrow the terminology from biblical, creationists, like created, spontaneously created in the Big Bang. No, it wasn't created if you don't believe that there was a creator. But he says, space and energy, it just came about in the Big Bang. And then he addressed what caused the Big Bang. And what did one of the foremost, believed to be scientists on the earth at that time say caused the Big Bang? He said it was nothing, that nothing caused the Big Bang. Think about the implications of such a statement. The fact of the matter is, though, we did not evolve, and we did not evolve for some very fundamental reasons. One of those is simply that matter demands a maker. That matter demands a maker. You do not see church buildings, nice church buildings like this, just pop into existence from nothing, do you? I mean, this is a very nice building. There was money involved. There was bricks and mortar. I guess it was bricks. I can't remember what the outside looks like right now, but there was all sorts of things that were involved in putting this together. The Italian restaurant that some of us just got through eating at, and I apologize for all the garlic bread that I ate. I mean, I'm not sorry I ate it, but I'm sorry for those on the first few rows that I ate it because I haven't brushed my teeth. I didn't have time to brush my teeth. You know what I did? I do have my toothbrush in my bag, though. I probably should have done that. But, that Italian restaurant, the food didn't just... Well, it did just kind of almost magically arrive at the tables. We didn't even have to order it, but it did not pop into existence from nothing. I mean, you know this. My good friend Dr. Jeff Miller has written a lot on the causality, the law of cause and effect. And even though we don't define it every day, every material effect must have an adequate antecedent. I can just hear Jeff say this now. As he's in the room next to me talking to someone on the phone. Now, we know the law of cause and effect. Can y'all tell I joke on Jeff just a little bit? Probably shouldn't do that. Every material effect must have an adequate antecedent or simultaneous cause. If I told you that my sweet wife that I'm so blessed to have as a wife and that she's with me here this weekend, if I told you that we flew today from Atlanta all the way to Boise on the back of a paper airplane, you would know that did not happen. It could not happen. That's not a great enough cause to make such an effect. Our youngest ones here this evening, some of our 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds, you understand that. We didn't fly here on the back of a paper airplane. We didn't even fly here on the back of a hummingbird or on the back of a bald eagle. We flew on some kind of large jet that would seat probably about 200 plus people. Mike got here on a rocket ship from NASA. I'm not really sure how. Actually, I think I heard about Mike's troubles that he had, and man, I mean, it was he finally just had to drive from Salt Lake City, if I remember correctly. I mean, matter demands a maker. Where did it all come from? And furthermore, there's just the fact that in nature, matter and energy are neither created nor destroyed. I mean, again, you don't see matter just popping into existence from nothing. It doesn't happen. Scientifically speaking, operationally speaking, observationally speaking, it doesn't happen. And yet we're supposed to believe that it did at least one time, billions of years ago, that an entire universe just popped into existence, or that little cosmic egg just popped into existence, that banged, that exploded, that caused the entire gargantuan universe in which we live. There was an article that was written a few years ago in New Scientist magazine, and the author of the article, I believe that he was asked to write this article. I really do, because about a month and a half earlier, there was an article that was written about the Big Bang where an evolutionary astrophysicist was making several claims about the Big Bang having a lot of problems. I'm guessing that New Scientist caught a lot of flack for that. So they had someone else write a different article, but it was called What Put the Bang in the Big Bang? What put the bang? No, it was called What Triggered the Big Bang, the beginning, what triggered the Big Bang. And so in this article, the author gave all of these possibilities, what he thought were possibilities, or what he would call models. Maybe this model, maybe this is how it happened, or maybe this was the model, or maybe it was this, and all these possibilities for what may have caused the universe. And then you get to the final conclusion of the matter. I want you to read what David Shiga wrote at the end of this article. He said, the most likely outcome, however, is that none of the models will be proved correct anytime soon. Indeed, the quest to understand the origin of the universe seems destined to continue until we can answer a deeper question. Why is there anything at all instead of nothing? Man, I appreciated the question. I appreciated his honesty. Why is there, if there is no God, if there is nothing but the natural realm, and at one time there was not a natural realm, there was not a material universe, if there was nothing, the author says, why is there anything at all instead of nothing? You know, he is asking this question because he knows, like some of our youngest ones know, that 0 plus 0 is what? Is 0. That 0 times 0 is 0. That 0 divided by 0 is 0. That 0 minus 0 is 0. It's 0. It's nothing. And you can't get something from nothing. And yet, our young people in institutions of higher learning all over this world, they're made to feel stupid. Sorry, I know we don't use that word a whole lot. We didn't in my house with our kids growing up. They are made to feel ignorant because they believe that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Brothers and sisters, some of you probably know this better than others, but this is not some mere academic exercise. This is a battle. This is a war that is going on. I mean, I know that when you hear Dr. Jeff Miller wax eloquently for an hour or so, I think you got to preach about today. You preached about as long as your dad did today, Jeff. You know, I know that you can sit there and you can be quite amazed by all of these details and these facts that you did not hear in school and you don't hear much on television. And you might sit there and think, well, these are just facts. You know, yes, they're right, they're exactly right, but you know, there is a war going on. Jeff doesn't just spit out these facts. You know what he also does? Is he talks to souls about their souls when they're troubled. You know what Dr. Mike Houts does? More than just Q&A periods, answering difficult questions, is he talks to people about their lives, about their souls, because there is a war going on. Let me just tell you real quickly, just interrupt this lesson for a moment and just say, let me just tell you what happened to me in 1 week. 1 week of time at Apologetics Press just a few weeks ago. It was, I guess, in July or August of this summer. One of our interns who was serving under Dr. Jeff, he was telling me one day, I think it was probably on a Monday or Tuesday, he said, yeah, Eric, one of the first science classes I had, it was before he became a student at the Bear Valley School of Preaching, and he said that one of the first classes, one of the first days, the teacher gave us the syllabus, and on the back of it, it just said, are you a creationist or are you an evolutionist? And he put he was a creationist. And he said the professor let him know that one of his goals will be to try to convince him that evolution is true, and that's how the universe got here. Cosmic evolution. That's how life got here. Biological evolution. And it was during that same week that I got one of the saddest phone calls that I've had in a while. One of the best men I know on this planet. One of the kindest, one of the best just teachers and preachers and workers in the kingdom. If you knew this man, you would say he is the salt of the earth. I mean, you would just think of him as just being like one of those just good servants of Jesus Christ. He doesn't look for glory, he doesn't look for fame. He is just constantly just plugging along, moving along. And I get a phone call about one of his kids who now is claiming that she is an atheist, having grown up in the church, having had 2 wonderful Christian parents, and that her husband is claiming to be an atheist. And I'm going to speak in Birmingham that Wednesday night at a congregation on the subject matter of atheism and the Bible, and I stop off at one of my favorite stops in America, exit 205 on I-65 in Alabama, and some of you who've been in Alabama know that's the Peach Park exit, and I stop there regularly. It was all I could do to not stop there this last week when I was going through, but my wife made me go to the Cheesecake Factory, so after I had a piece of cheesecake from there, I couldn't stop at Peach Park. But I stopped by Peach Park, and Dave, I did leave AP a little early that day, and I ate for a while at Peach Park, and I was studying for my lesson a little bit, and I was reading, and I had my Bible there, and I had my computer open, and here it is, I get an angry email from And I know that not all atheists are unkind or angry, and if you are an unbeliever and you're here with us tonight, please know that you are our honored guest, and we're so tickled that you are here. But this email was from an angry atheist, and he wanted me to know this is why you guys are absolutely ignorant, and this is why atheism is true, and this is why I don't believe in the God of the Bible. And I no more got through answering that email than a man came over and saw a Bible laying in my computer open. He said, "Look like you're going to preach somewhere tonight." He may have not used the word preach, maybe he said speak or teach or something. And I said, "Actually, yes, I am." And I told him what I was going to be speaking on. He said, I'm from Spokane, Washington. Not far from here. Hey, listen, everybody goes to Peach Park in Alabama, let me tell you. From Spokane. You from Spokane, Washington? Did I say that correctly? Is it Spokane? It looks like Spokane, I think, when it's spelled out. But anyway, he said, "My daughter's an atheist, and her daughter's being raised to be an atheist." The great thing is, by the grace of God, I was able to give him some AP information, and since then, he's gotten an AP study Bible. He's gotten some other books. By the way, we brought some AP study Bibles with us. They're in the back in one of the rooms if you're interested in that. You might, listen, if you want one of those, you don't have to pay $10 or $100 shipping or whatever it costs to mail a 4-pound Bible these days, but there are some in the back. And so he's been able to get some materials for his family. I get back to the office, I believe it was the very next day. And our good friend Kyle Butt calls and tells me again one of the sadder stories about a young man who was viewed in this Christian high school that he attended as being one of the most solid, rock-solid Christians who left home and now claims he's an atheist. That was just 1 week of time. So please understand, this is real stuff. This is not merely words on a page. It's not merely academic. It's real. Well, let me get back to the lesson at hand. So, where did everything come from? Does matter not demand a maker? Why is there anything at all instead of nothing? The most famous atheist in the world today, Dr. Richard Dawkins, he was asked about this on national television in Australia a few years ago. I believe it was in 2012. And he was asked, well, what about getting something from nothing? And you can go to YouTube, and if you know exactly what to type in, I forgot exactly what it is, but Richard Dawkins, probably Australia. You got to be careful, by the way, typing stuff in on the internet and on YouTube. You want to be very careful about things like that. But Dr. Richard Dawkins responded to this question saying, of course, it's counterintuitive that you can get something from nothing. It doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem natural. Of course, he says, common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting in order to give rise to the universe at all. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. Something very mysterious actually did. The depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. Oh, wow. God. Something pretty mysterious. Not an alien form in some other planet, which, by the way, if aliens seeded life here, do you know what would still have to be explained is what? Where did the aliens come from? I mean, so you're just pushing this back. And we want to thank Dr. Richard Dawkins for teaching our lesson, by the way, common sense. Common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. You know, don't you love the wisdom of the aged? You know, I tell you what, the older my parents get, the sweeter they get. Now, we got to understand the sense in which I'm using the word sweeter, okay? I mean, Mimi can be sweet, but Mimi she can get after you now. But I tell you, the older they get, the more I just want to hear my dad, 86 years old, survivor of COVID, he and my mother both, to talk. Let me tell you about a young skeptic who said to an elderly lady, I once believed in God, but since studying science, I'm convinced that God is but an empty word. Well, she said, I've not studied science, but since you have, maybe you can tell me from whence came this egg. Why, of course, from the hen was the reply. And where did the hen come from? Why, the egg. And perhaps, said the lady, you can tell me which existed first. The hen, of course, rejoined the young man. You mean that the hen existed without having come from an egg? Oh no, said the young man, I should have said the egg was first. Then you mean the egg existed without having come from a hen? The young man cried, you've got me all mixed up. And so she drove home her point. Young man, since you can't explain the existence of even a hen or an egg without God, you can't expect me to believe that you can explain the existence of the whole universe without Him. So true. I wish I knew who wrote that. I looked, I've searched, I cannot find where that is originally from. Matter demands a maker. Evolution is not true. And you shouldn't believe it for a whole lot of reasons. I mean, every house is built by someone. Where did the universe come from? How did it get here? Is it rational? Does it make sense? Should we just believe? I mean, I sat there listening years ago when that first aired, Dr. Stephen Hawking saying nothing caused the Big Bang. Of course, that's not how he talked at that time. He had a lot of physical disabilities. Nothing caused the Big Bang. And I sat there and thought, how many millions of people around the world are listening to this and thinking, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense that nothing caused the Big Bang? That makes no sense. It defies everything we know. It does what Richard Dawkins says. It defies common sense. It's counterintuitive. Every house is built by someone, but He who built all things is God. Both heaven and earth reveal that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. Where did the physical realm come from? It came from God. And it is absolutely, perfectly sensible to begin with, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. But some might say, well, Eric, what caused God? Where did God come from? And there's nothing wrong with asking that question. We get asked that question quite a bit. I remember, going to this place, to that place, one of the more frequently asked questions we get is, wait a minute, where did God come from? What caused God? And that's okay to ask that question. And we're not opposed to that question necessarily. As far as you can ask any question you want. That doesn't mean that we know the answer to everything, but I tell you one thing about this question, is asking the question where God came from is kind of like asking, no, it's really exactly like asking, when did eternity begin? Oh, eternity never began. Well, when does eternity end? Eternity doesn't end. Well, why? Because by definition, eternity had no beginning and had no end. And by definition, God, the God of the Bible, the all-knowing, eternal, uncreated, omnipotent, omniscient God of the universe, He wasn't caused. He's always been. You might say, well, Eric, what about that law of cause and effect? Well, the law of cause and effect is based upon, and it's the most fundamental, really, law of science. You can't do anything, really, without understanding that law. And it's based upon what we see in the material realm. Every material effect must have an adequate antecedent or simultaneous cause. You know what atheistic evolutionists often do? As we've already seen, when one individual stated that, that all the matter and energy that it spontaneously was created. So often, atheistic evolutionists illogically endow nature with the ability to behave supernaturally. But that's illogical. That doesn't make sense. Ken Ami wrote in his article, True Free Thinker, he said, supposedly, it is ignorant and superstitious to believe that God made everything out of nothing, but it is rational and scientific to believe that nothing made everything out of nothing? Really? So what have we done here? We've just assigned matter the attributes of a supernatural creator. God is an effect and must have a cause, but matter is the uncaused first cause? What, are we just giving matter the ability to have supernatural attributes? If God made everything, then who made God? Well, matter made everything and nothing made matter. You see what's going on here. Supposedly it's ignorant and superstitious to believe that God is eternal, but it's rational and scientific to believe, as some do, not as many, but some, that matter is eternal. Let's just give matter the ability to behave supernaturally, all the while rejecting the supernatural. Matter demands a maker. But what about the biological life on Earth? Is evolution not true in this way? Did life not evolve? There's this theory that George A. Kirkert wrote about many years ago. He said there's a theory that all living forms in the world have arisen from a single source, which itself came from an inorganic form. This theory can be called the general theory of evolution. Biological evolution. It is, as George Gaylord Simpson said, a fully natural, there's no supernatural here, a fully natural process inherent in the physical properties of the universe by which life arose in the first place and by which all living things, past or present, have since developed divergently and progressively. I mean, it's supposedly a fact. Stephen Jay Gould said, it's a fact like apples falling out of trees. Listen, I picked peaches in Porter, Oklahoma in 100-degree heat back the summer after my senior year, and we also picked apples, and I tell you, they will, if you don't pick them fast enough, they will fall. That's a fact. Is that how factual the general theory of evolution is? It's as well documented, allegedly, as any phenomenon in science, as strongly as the Earth's revolution around the sun, rather than vice versa. In this sense, we can call evolution a fact. Or how about in New Scientist magazine in the year 2008, evolution is as firmly established a scientific fact as the roundness of the Earth? Is that right? Or what U.S. News and World Report had as their cover story, the new reality of evolution, where we came from, where are we going? By now, scientists say evolution is no longer just a theory. It's an everyday phenomenon, a fundamental fact of biology, as real as hunger and as unavoidable as death. This is how they illustrated it. What kind of evolution are they talking about, Eric? They're not talking about microevolution. They're not talking about just mere small changes within kinds. They're talking about, as they illustrated here, amoebas to amphibians and reptiles and bird-like this and that to mammals to man to whatever else we're allegedly becoming. I mean, that's their illustration of this. This is expected to be so factual that when the Cobb County School Board in 2002 decided that they were going to put a sticker in the front of their young people's science textbooks that said, this textbook contains material on evolution. Evolution is a theory, not a fact, regarding the origin of living things. This material should be approached with an open mind, studied carefully, and critically considered. Notice there's no statement here about God. There's nothing here about the Bible. There's nothing here about Jesus Christ. Evolution is a theory, not a fact, regarding the origin of living things. The ACLU, the beloved ACLU, I mean, it sounds, the American Civil Liberties Union sounds pretty good. There's a lot of things that have gone on that they have instigated, along with, I only know of one, maybe there was more, one parent in Cobb County that I actually met not long after this took place, filed a lawsuit against the Cobb County School Board. Eventually this went to trial, was declared unconstitutional, and they had to remove it from their textbooks because they said evolution is a theory, not a fact, regarding the origin of living things. But wait a minute, life demands a life giver. Life demands a life giver. I mean, this is Biology 101, the law of biogenesis. Life, beginning of life. This is science. This is proven. This is studied. This has been tested. In nature, all life comes from previous life of its own kind. Spontaneous generation of life does not happen. We've never seen it happen. No one has. You can sit here all night and you're not going to see a puppy just spontaneously generate as much as you might like one. I remember when I was a kid, I just remember wanting a dog at one time and wanting a horse at another time. Neither of them magically appeared. I finally did get a dog. I never got a horse. We lived in the city. I don't think that would have worked really all that well. Puppies don't spontaneously generate. Chickens don't spontaneously generate. Though I did wonder what happened, Janet, to those 24 eggs that were in our refrigerator the other day that were given to us, and they were just gone when I got back from my last trip. And then I remembered you cooked them all and froze them, and then we heated them up later. But they didn't spontaneously generate, nor did they spontaneously just leave either. I mean, matter and energy are neither created nor destroyed, and life doesn't just pop into existence from non-life. We've known this for many years. I mean, look at this quotation from nearly 100 years ago. J.W. and Solomon, said the beginning of the evolutionary process raises a question which is yet unanswerable. And the thing is, it's still unanswerable. What was the origin of life on this planet? Until fairly recent times, there was a pretty general belief in the occurrence of spontaneous generation. And then you recall some of the experiments from maybe your biology textbooks of Francisco Redi in the 1600s and Louis Pasteur in the 1800s. You remember some of those pictures that had the jars with meat in the jars, and some of the jars were open and some were shut, and some had gauze on the top. Those were the experiments that Francisco Redi had done and proved. And then Louis Pasteur comes along, I don't know, 150 years or so later, and proves that even on a microscopic level that life does not, will not spontaneously generate. J.W. Sullivan went on to say, but careful experiments, notably those of Pasteur, showed that this conclusion was due, that is, spontaneous generation, due to imperfect observation, and it became an accepted doctrine that life never arises except from life. So far as the actual evidence goes, this is still the only possible conclusion. It was the only possible conclusion in 1933, and it's the only possible conclusion in 2021. But since it is a conclusion that seems to lead back to some supernatural creative act, it is a conclusion that scientific men, not scientific men, atheistic evolutionary scientists find very difficult of acceptance. You think our NASA scientist has a problem accepting the law of biogenesis, or a biomechanical engineer, or any of the other scientists or doctors that we have here in our midst today? This is not a scientific problem. It's not a scientist problem. It is a lie problem. It is an untruth problem. It is a Satan problem. He is the liar, the father of it, and he's still spreading these lies. And at the very base, fundamental, foundational level, that there is no God, that you weren't created. Now, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth. Robert Jastrow said, 40 or so years after J.W. Sullivan, he said, according to this story, evolution, every tree, every blade of grass, and every creature in the sea and on the land of all that of one parent strand of molecular matter drifting lazily in a warm pool, what concrete evidence supports the remarkable theory of the origin of life? There is none. There was none. There will be none. Because life demands a life giver. Physicist Paul Davies said more recently, he said one of the great outstanding scientific mysteries is the origin of life. How did it happen? The truth is nobody has a clue. But he's flat out wrong. Because as simple as I am, as common and just fundamental as I am, listen, when you come out of Muskogee, Oklahoma, you're not real fancy, okay? I can understand something about how life got here. In fact, the smartest ones, the most intellectual ones, the Nobel laureates of the world who have taught at Harvard University, they know something about life. Dr. George Wald said in an article that we have a copy of at Apologetics Press in Scientific American several years ago, he said the reasonable view was to believe in spontaneous generation, that life could come from non-life. People used to think that hundreds of years ago, but they never proved that. They just mistakenly thought that. The only alternative to believe in a single primary act of supernatural creation, there is no third position. He said, you got two choices. Notice what he went on to say. Most modern biologists, having reviewed with satisfaction the downfall of the spontaneous generation hypothesis, yet unwilling to accept the alternative belief in special creation, unwilling to believe in special creation, are left with nothing. And he said, I think a scientist has no choice but to approach the origin of life through a hypothesis of spontaneous generation. He's saying we just have to believe in that which is unbelievable. I believe it was Jeff who was talking about the blind faith last hour that we had a lecture in here. Does this not sound like blind faith to you? How did life get here? Well, the scientific law of biogenesis says demonstrates, it is demonstrated every day around the world that life comes from life in nature and that of its own kind. In nature, this is what we see. Life demands previous life. The atheistic evolutionist Dr. Wald said, you got two choices: spontaneous generation or supernatural creative act by implied supernatural creator. How did life get here? Science tells us how. If one is obviously not true, that only leaves one other. And by the way, the Bible has told us this for years. God, He gives to all life, as Paul preached in Acts 17. God created every living thing, and He created every living thing according to their kind. According to their kind. That's a scientifically accurate statement. Because what we see over and over again is exactly what the Bible says. That life comes from life, and exactly what the law of biogenesis says of its own kind. You know, Jan and I had to leave a little dog at our house. He's not a puppy anymore. He's 12 years old. We kind of think of him as a puppy because he's so short and little. He's a half weenie dog, half Springer Spaniel. The people who gave him to us called him a spring weenie. I'd never met another spring weenie outside of that family of dogs before. And last week I was in Columbus, Ohio, and I saw this little dog coming in the airport. Man, they let all kind of dogs in the airports these days. And I said, hey, that's a nice little dog. And I found out it was a spring weenie. She didn't call it that, but that's what it was, she said. You know, you can get all sorts of dogs. I mean, we have relatives who had a dog. What kind of dog was Jack, honey? That thing it looked like a mini horse. I forgot what kind of dog it was. It wasn't a greyhound, but I mean, you can have greyhounds and you can have chihuahuas. You have a lot of varieties, but they're never going to become anything other than a dog. They reproduce after their own kind. That's what science says. But you know, if evolution is true, then as little toddlers are taught in their pop-up history book of life on earth, and fish became amphibians, and they became reptiles and dinosaurs and mammals, and man, that's what this book teaches. Given to me by a Christian, by the way, who said, there's a Christian family who gave my kid this book. Like, we want to read this to our child. On the back of the book it says, millions of years ago, life on earth started in the oceans, then it moved on to land and eventually led to you. Just led to you. Is this our history? Is that where we came from? Is this that tree of life that Jeff was talking about? You know, do we start out as an amoeba and then we have a worm and then we become a fish and then we become a frog amphibian and maybe a snake over here, a reptile and a lower mammal and a lemur and a monkey and a man, and there we are. And there's our alleged history. By the way, let me tell you just one kind of sad note on this. This came from a Christian college science classroom. I took a picture of it. I wish I could say that next to it there was this note or placard that said, now this is the false theory of evolution that teaches this. But sadly, it seems to me that in many, if not most, of our Christian universities, this stuff is taught. I'll have, Lord willing, a little bit more to say about that in the 9 o'clock period tomorrow, which doesn't bring me any joy whatsoever. But there are a lot of Christians who have kind of bought into a lot of the evolutionary theory when I'm thinking, wait a minute, not only should you not buy into it on a biblical basis, you shouldn't even buy into it on a scientific basis. Because life comes from life, and that of its own kind. Life demands a life giver. Matter demands a maker. And by the way, the proofs of evolution do not prove macroevolution. They just don't. Here's a little book I got from Graves County, Kentucky several years ago. I mean, it's not just a little book. It was used in middle school there. It was used in schools across the country, especially down south in the southeast. A book on evolution, change over time. There's nothing wrong with the word evolution in and of itself. I'm evolving. My hair is much grayer than it used to be. I'm thankful I still have some hair. I never knew how gray my hair was, Brother John, until I got a video back from World Video Bible School this last time I was down there, and I thought, who is that? Who is that? My hair is not that gray, but yes it is. Yes it is. It's changing. I have bigger love handles than I think I've ever had. I'm just a little bit thicker around the waist right now. You might say, in a sense, I'm evolving. That's microevolution. I'm not evolving into an alien. I'm not evolving into something other than just being a human being. The proofs of evolution do not prove macroevolution. These are just a sampling of some of the things that we have here in this book. Oh, we've got the English peppered moth. I was speaking just a couple of weeks ago down in Florida, and I was talking about evolution. I hadn't even gotten to any of this, and hadn't gotten to it that night in that particular lecture. And this young, probably about a 7th grader, comes up to me and says, "Wait a minute, what about those English peppered moths? Don't they prove, some kind of evolution?" I said, "Well, we're going to talk about that maybe tomorrow." And I got it right here. It doesn't. The way they tell the story in the textbooks, in many textbooks, the story's not even true the way they tell it. Number two, even if it was true, what did it prove? That moths are moths. Yeah, they have the genetic makeup to be able to have different colored moths. But you know what? We have that among human beings. And it's a beautiful thing. I'm thankful for that. We've got shades. We got darker skin and we have lighter skin. That's great. But that doesn't mean that we're evolving into anything. And over here, when you look at these alleged similarities in embryos and embryological development, that supposedly proves what? Well, number one, the similarities are highly exaggerated. They're nothing like what Ernst Haeckel proposed back in the latter part of the 19th century that has continuously been recycled in textbooks that even evolutionists have said, leading ones have said, it's a lot of mindless recycling going on. So the similarities have been highly exaggerated, but there's a part of me that says, who cares if there are some similarities? I mean, what does that prove? It's like the previous page in this textbook. They say, well, look at the forearm of the man and the wing of the bat and the flipper of the whale and the leg of the dog. Well, those are all similar to each other. Homologous structures. The proof from homology. What does that prove? Does it prove we all came from a common ancestor like they tell kids? These similarities indicate that each organism has evolved from a common ancestor, hundreds of millions of years ago, supposedly. It doesn't prove that. That is not proof of anything. My dog that I have at home, can you tell I like to talk about my dog? I just love that little dude. I mean, he's 12 years old now. He's lonesome as all get out back home, and we always look forward to seeing him again. Do you know my dog and I, we have a lot of similarities. We breathe the same air. You know that? We breathe expensive air because my wife likes to set it on like 72, which is a little higher than what Jeff likes. I think Jeff likes to set his on about 68. But he breathes the same body air that I breathe. He drinks the same water I drink. I mean, I don't drink out of his bowl, but we get it out of a tap. I put it in his bowl. I do take the same cup, and I put some of it in his bowl, and I put the other part in Jana's coffee maker. And so, but it's, out of the tap. But we drink the same water. We breathe the same air. We walk on the same land in the backyard. All half an acre, or whatever it is. We run around on it together. We eat some of the same food. Sometimes he has a chicken nugget. I don't eat his food, but sometimes he eats our food. For all that to happen, there have to be some similarities, but they don't prove evolution. By the way, I'm thankful. I'm very thankful there are similarities. You know why? Because when I tore my anterior cruciate ligament my junior year of high school, I went to Dr. Merriman. He said, now, Eric, there's different options here. He said, we could take, I believe he said we could take something out of the back of your leg and replace your anterior cruciate ligament, or we could take a part of your patella tendon and replace your anterior cruciate ligament, or we can get a goat tendon. I said, nah, I'm not having that. I am not having that. So he took a part of the patella tendon. But if goats, it's terrible. That is terrible. That was the cheesy Italian stuff we had tonight. Sorry. If goats had nothing in common with human beings, we couldn't do that. There are some people who have valves in their heart right now that are from pigs. Aren't you thankful if you chose, and we're not going to have a debate tonight on the vaccine, but if you chose to get the vaccine of the COVID vaccine. Aren't you thankful that that was first tested on animals before it was tested? I'm assuming that was the case. Okay, maybe I'm assuming too much. But that most medicines and things like that, all the medicines that my dad takes, I'm thankful that he wasn't the first one to take them, that they were tested for years on animals. What good would that have done if humans and animals are nothing alike? Don't you see that some of the similarities between animals and humans is really a gracious gift from our God and not any kind, in any way, a proof of evolution? It's simply the story they tell. Like the story they tell in this textbook on camel evolution. Let's just see if I can find this real quick. I mean, they put a whole picture in here for kids on camel evolution. And I probably can't even find it now. Let's see here. Oh, here it is. I mean, 2/3, 3/4 of a page, camel evolution. I mean, you got something up here down here that looks like my dog that allegedly evolved into a camel. There's no proof of this. They just have fossils that they then say, well, you know, this must be the ancestor of that, and that must be the ancestor of that. And I know I'm simplifying that greatly, but the fact is there are no arrows in the fossil record that show that this thing came from this thing that came from that thing. And here's what they tell kids. They said, the diagram shows the fossil record of the past 65 million years in the evolution of the camel. No, it doesn't. That's what they say it does. That's what they tell kids, but it is a lie. They have no proof for this. This is merely the fairy tale that they tell. There's no proof of this. Well, what does it all matter? And I didn't bring my phone up here with me to look at the time, and there is a glare on that clock back there, so I really can't tell what time it is. I'm going to quickly just go through the rest of this. Dr. Hout said he's speaking until 9 o'clock in the morning anyway, so I don't know. What does it all matter? What does it matter if there is a God? What does it matter if we were created? Dr. George Gaylord Simpson, one of the more well-known evolutionists of last century, said man is the result of purposeless and materialistic process that did not have him in mind. That makes you feel good about yourself, doesn't it? Richard Dawkins says, this universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. Is that what this life is all about? He says the purpose of this life is to replicate your DNA, but how could he ever prove that that is your purpose? He can't. I mean, some people would say, no, we need to stop doing that because there are too many people on the planet. And we need to reduce the human population because we're allegedly ruining planet Earth. They would say maybe just the opposite is our purpose, and they couldn't prove that either because they have no objective standard upon which to say such a thing. Dr. William Provine may have said it best, sadly, from an atheistic evolutionary perspective when he said humans are complex organic machines that die completely with no survival of soul or psyche, no inherent moral or ethical laws exist, nor are there absolute guiding principles for human society. The universe cares nothing for us, and we have no ultimate meaning in life. We have no ultimate meaning in life. Don't you know that Charles Darwin seemed to understand perfectly the moral implications of atheism, which is one reason he gave for being content to remain an agnostic. He said a man who has no assured and ever-present belief in the existence of a personal God or of a future existence with retribution and reward can have for his rule of life, as far as I can see, only to follow those impulses and instincts which are the strongest and which seem to him the best ones. When you take atheistic, evolutionary thoughts to their logical conclusion, you know what kind of world you get? You get the kind of world that Noah lived in, where every intent of the thoughts of the hearts of man was only evil, continually. There is no right, allegedly. There is no wrong. Everyone does. Judges 21:25, to quote the inspired writer of Judges, does that which is right in his own eyes. I mean, just let's enjoy all the pleasures, the prestige, the power, the food, the sexual relations, whatever you want to have, however much, whenever, however, do whatever. Why? Why not just do whatever you feel like doing? Can you see the logical implications of atheistic evolution and why this matters? Remember now your Creator. Remember Ecclesiastes 12, verse 7. The one to whom the Creator of our souls, the one to whom our souls are returning. Remember now. Let's remember what Paul told those in Athens, that we are His offspring. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we have been created. The difference in having a framework in which to live, to think that we evolve from bacteria and worms and fish over billions of years, believing that and believing that we were created by the very hand of the eternal, omnipotent, omniscient Creator of the universe, they are as far apart as you can get. I'm so thankful that our life has absolute, provable meaning. And it's not that I just want it to, and thus I believe it. It's, yeah, I want it to. I want it to have something more than just I'm going to die and it's all over. But it has absolute meaning. And at the very base of that, the very base reason is because you were created in the image of God Almighty.